Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of SurrealEstate, a great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I kind of went into this with a misconception. I thought this would be a little more comedy based than it was. Like now, not saying like it's in a bad way or anything. Like I think it's just for whatever reason I thought like the tonally it wouldn't be as serious and as spooky as it is. I figured there'd be spooky elements, but I thought it kind of blend more horror comedy than it does. But it's like 75% like spooky, eerie, supernatural, like horror seriousness, and then like 25% comedy. Once again, like not a criticism or anything. Like I said, it's just a misconception I had going into this. So, but it's interesting. I do really like how Luke presents everything. Like he's got like the key note thing that he's got prepared, and it's like right. Because of the nature of his business and everything, he keeps it very open-ended in the sense of like leaves room for there's explainable stuff, and then there's the more like non-explainable stuff, like even having that acronym of like metaphysical stuff is what we deal with, and it ends up being an acronym of S.M.E.P, and it's like right, he was like, I was hoping that it'd spell out something like Spectre, but it didn't, and he's like, we actually got dangerously close to getting smegma as the initials for the But essentially, he tries to spin it where it's like, right, regardless of whether you really believe in like the supernatural, the ghosts and stuff like that. He's like, I don't believe in them. I believe in them. I just work with them. But it's a whole thing of, there's some things that can be explained and some things that can't. But also, like, it doesn't matter. Because even if it's just something spooky or whatever, like, the nature of like something just being off will like cause issues, like make it harder to sell a house. And I love him being like, all right, so here's the scary part. Can you handle it? And then it's like, okay, next slide. The value of your house is going to go down 35%, and it's going to be 317%. It'll take 317% longer to sell your house because of it. And I love that was supposed to be the scary side of things, because he does take the real estate side of things very seriously. Because even later on, at one point, it's like, right, Megan was like, we should either burn this house down so it can go back to hell, or I'll lower the price on it. He was like, lower the price? Like, that's what, it's like, wait, that's what you're focusing on? You know what's interesting? I figured Megan's fiance might be a bigger part of it, but it's like, no, I guess it's just like, right, she has to kind of deal with this alone because like none of the stuff happens when he's around. But I also love that conversation too of like, right, he's a lawyer, kind of like yuck. And she's like, but you real estate people are just the same. He's like, right, we're both parasites. It's just that real estate people, we don't do nearly as much damage to the host, which I thought was kind of interesting. But I thought maybe he'd play a bigger role or something like that. But I guess it's just kind of like the significance of just like, right, this is my fiance and I need you here with me and you're not home. Like, I thought there'd be more of a plot thing related to that, but it ended up not being the case. But aside from all that, like not just Luke, which really quickly on the subject of Luke, obviously we learned a little bit more about him. Obviously his family circumstances, his mom left him when he was young. His dad raised him alone. His dad died a few years ago, and he says like, oh yeah, I stay in contact with my dad. So it's like, and at first you're like, it's not quite clear whether he was like saying that jokingly just to kind of mess with Susan, or whether, but later on conversations make it seem like no, he was sincere about it. Like he has stayed in contact with his dad, because he's saying that basically like love is one of those things that just kind of transcends like life and death type. Like it's kind of what the conversation is. But it definitely seemed like they're setting up like there is something sinister with Luke's, because like obviously Megan initially is kind of like, right, it's daylight, and she's thinking like, right, I'm a little crazy, so I don't need your help like looking into like the supernatural affairs at my house or something like that. And basically Luke says like a line of the light of day fools you, and he looks at like a painting and it's like a sinister figure. So I'm like, is that something that has to associate with his past? Because there's definitely something like not 100% normal with Luke, because, once again, we meet the team, but really quickly, like August needed like glasses, like special devices to see the actual specters at, Megan's place. But at later point in the episode, Roman's looking and he sees the silhouettes of the ghosts. I'm like, So I guess he's kind of got like an Ichigo thing kind of going on. If you're familiar with Bleach at all, like Ichigo could see spirits, just because of like it was his experience. I don't know if like that kind of gets retconned because of later revelations about Ichigo's dad and everything, whether that changed anything, but I think it was like his experience from a young age, like everything with his mom that led to like him being able to see God. So I'm wondering if that, the conversation about his dad shows that he must have like some connection to the spiritual world, whether it's like something traumatic happened, or maybe he would like had a near death experience, so he crossed over and he came back. If I remember correctly, I think that's what happened to Ichigo, like crossing back over made him be able to see ghosts. But once again, I don't know if that gets retconned by some of the other revelation about Ichigo's family. But so circling back to Roman, I'm wondering, is there something, Luke, but I'm wondering maybe it's a family thing that runs in him. And once again, we don't have answers to that. Maybe that's something we'll find out about as the course of the season. But circling back to, introductions to the rest of the team, we actually didn't get to spend much time with Zoe in this episode. I thought that was interesting. We got a lot more with Phil and August, but like we got like the introduction to Zoe, and that was it. Like, we know, like, it's like, her thing is like she knows where the bodies are buried. I'm like, and that was it. We never really got to find out what that means. We find out that Phil was an ex-priest, and I'm like, whoa, I didn't. And they said like, oh, he's like a fallen priest. It's kind of what he said. And I was like, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting it. I knew like going into this, like August was going to be like the IT guy. Like he's the one that kind of serves all the tech stuff. But also I love that like at first I was like, because his first two lines in the show are quotes. And I'm like, is he going to do that the entire time? It's like, no, it doesn't seem like it. But it seems like that's just kind of a characteristic he has. They also get Susan on board. Now, really quickly, just kind of like an interesting thing I wasn't aware of. First and foremost, the actress who plays Susan is Sarah Levy. I did not know Eugene Levy had a daughter. I only found out about Dan Levy like in the more recent years because of Schmidt's Creek, which I've never seen. I've heard nothing but good things. I've seen promos of it, just never watched it. But speaking of that, I didn't know that Tim Rosen, who plays Luke, and Sarah Levy were actually on that show together, because I remember reading something like a month or two ago being like, oh yeah, Sarah and Tim reunite in SurrealEstate. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I had no idea. But like, I didn't even know that was his daughter. He had a daughter until like, because she's in like a Capital One commercial with her dad. So I was like, that's what made me go like, oh, like, is that actually your daughter? And looked it up. It's like, yeah, that's his daughter. Interesting. So I went on a tangent there, but also kind of on the same realm of a tangent. It's actually really interesting to me. Like, it's weird hearing Tim Rosen talk now for me, because I'm so used to like him sounding the way he does as Doc Holliday on Winona Earp that it messes with me. I never thought about it when I was watching him in Vagrant Queen, because I guess at that time, because there was a long break in between season 3 and season 4 of Winona Earp, so it wasn't as in my like. It wasn't in my like the zeitgeist of my mind as much, but now going back from finishing Winona Earp to now listening to him in this, I'm like, man, it's so weird. Obviously, because he puts on like a cowboy twang as Doc, but like that's just the whole thing. Like I said, it's just weird just hear his natural voice. I'm like, right, that I'm just so kind of used to you sounding like Doc in my especially because Winona just finishing and everything this year. So, but regardless. It is interesting too, like, obviously finding out about Susan's circumstances, like, right, she's with them now because she ended up getting fired, which I also love that, like, Luke had to give her the rundown of, like, yeah, so here's this key point thing, and she's like, S.M.E.P? And it's like, right, so explaining everything about, handling the more, like, things being both rational and, like I said, irrational, but, what was interesting is that there's another house that they were looking into that they were running like tests and stuff on it, but they couldn't find out anything supernatural about it. It seemed like there might be poltergeist elements with some of the stuff that was happening in the household, but they couldn't get any readings, and so Susan was the one kind of left in charge. And first I was like, why is he I guess you want her to have experience, but it's like he specifically left Susan in charge. I was like, what is up with that? And we kind of find out later on. Like, it definitely seemed like, first off, I was like, is it the daughter? Is she doing this? And it's like, at first I was like, is it like a ghost following her? But I'm like, they would have picked up some of that, right? It's like, no, she has telekinesis. So when like Susan like sees the teddy bear thing and she's just kind of like smiling and everything, like it's like, oh yeah, that baby's well, not baby, but that little toddler is freaking out, and like the bear levitates towards that child, and it's like, and Susan's just smiling like, hey, oh, because she's the one that was like very rational about a lot of that stuff. That I was like, okay, she was kind of like, whoa, is it like, she handled the supernatural stuff a lot better than Megan did, and it's like she was reluctant about it, but she wasn't as reluctant about it as Megan, because it's a thing of like, if you accept it, it makes you feel a little crazy that you accepted it type of thing. But I just thought it was fascinating with Susan, because I was like, what's that all about? And then Susan and that daughter talk, and she just casually drops telekinesis. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, wait, do people in this universe have power? And we're just accepting that? But it turns out, she later on brings it up, it's like, and then she jokes, she was like, oh yeah, there was a bass player and I set it on fire or whatever. I was like, wait, you have pyrokinesis? So not only do you have telekinesis, you also have pyrokinesis. That's pretty dope. I wonder if there's going to be an evolution to that, or those are going to be your two things. Like, I guess like that's going to be part of your arsenal, like in this ghost fighting situation. I was like, that's fascinating. I didn't expect that. Like, I thought everyone involved in this would just be like kind of regular people, like I said, like very like Exorcist vibe, but just be like regular people. But that was an interesting reveal. And even her being like, how'd you know about my telekinesis and pyrokinesis? And he's like, yeah, I just, we do research, we're really good at it. I'm like, wow. So that's why he left Susan in charge, because he figured out, I guess, at some point what was really going on. I guess, like, being there firsthand, seeing everything go down, like, he realized what was going on. So he left Susan in charge because he wanted her to figure it out, get her, take her first steps into, like, the Roman agency and what they do. But also he recognized, like, probably like, right, this is this, and you need to also be the one to talk to her about it, because of your personal experience, you'll be able to help her out. So I just thought that was so fascinating, because even she's like, right, I don't believe in all of that. It's like, well, what do you believe in? She's like, well, I believed I was in love with Bob, her previous boss. I believed that he was going to leave his wife for me, and obviously, renewed his vows and ended up firing her in the process. So a lot of interesting things on that front. But circling back to the Megan stuff, it turns out, I guess, like, more so because August had seen, like, he was like, oh, like, how'd your grandfather die? It's like, oh, he died kind of like somewhere else. So it's like, okay, because it's like he had dementia, and it's like, oh, of course. And like, he's looking, and there's a woman there, like, stabbed. It was like, this place is infested with ghosts, because Phil had looked into it, and the records only go back to like 1987. But he's like, that house is old enough to be like 100 years old. So like, what's up with that? And so it turns out, like, it's almost like, someone had suggested, like, oh, it's almost like the house just kind of like popped up one day. And Roman kind of, I'm calling him by his last name, but Luke was suggesting, like, maybe the place had always been there. And we find out he actually has a personal tie to it, that a neighbor lady came in to complain about the weeds, went in. We have no idea who answered the door. She went in and never came out. And it turns out that woman was his mom. That was like several years before Megan's grandfather bought the place. So basically, she had come back to town. Why necessarily? Roman didn't really get into that. Basically, he just says that, like, she had tried to contact him, I guess, like, after that event, but he hung up on her because it's like, right, you're my mom. I guess he didn't want to accept, like, the supernatural stuff, and maybe at that point in time when it happened. But also, like, he has probably issues with his mom because, like, right, you weren't in my life. And so he's never been able to connect with her until, like, at the very end of the episode, he sees her ghost kind of waving to him. So not necessarily tied to that house, but maybe somehow trapped in the spiritual realm. Like, whether she's like, she has a physical body and she's trapped in the spiritual realm, or whether it's just, as he tries to describe it, it isn't, because it's like, right, we're trying to avoid, like, a lot of the G word, ghost. He's like, yeah, remember, I don't have the G word ghost anywhere on this. I, even suggest, rather than saying, like, a house is, like, haunted or anything, it's stigmatized. It's a stigmatized property. It's kind of the whole point. But the whole point of it also is unfinished business. And so their job is to settle that unfinished business so they can sell the houses and stuff. But Megan almost got, like, these creepy doctors, like, put her on a table and we're going to cut into it. And I guess everyone that was there were, like, ghosts of people that had died in the place. And it's like, right, the places know how to get to you, and they know what's best to use against you, because she is a med student and she was reading a whole bunch of, like, medical books. So, like, I guess they knew that was, like, maybe, like, as a med student, she was trying to conquer her fear by reading about it. And it's like, the house was like, oh, you don't like that, so we're going to spook you with that. There's also like the dog. At first I was like, is that actual dog? I'm like, if that were the case, like it would need food and stuff like that. Which is interesting that they were able to feed like, I don't know if you call it a ghost dog or a demon dog. I guess and what immediately came to my mind was like, oh, like Hound of the Baskerville type of thing. Which obviously that changes depending on what Sherlock Holmes continuity you go with, like, because different iterations have done that storyline differently. But regardless, I thought it was fascinating that they were able to just kind of occupy it with that pork chop, and I love that she drops in. She's like, "Oh, it got a little dusty." He's like, "I don't think the dog is gonna matter." So they were to keep it occupied because it turns out her grandfather had, when he was renovating like the wine cellar, he had opened a door, which basically a portal to gateway or to something, and so they go and close it, not before it like a hand reaches out and grabs Megan. But yeah, just like, yeah, let's close that, get some people here to weld that up, and you're gonna sell this house. Granted, you're gonna need some proper representation, you know, someone you can trust, someone who's kind of an expert in this, and like she ends up having to hire him back. But you know, there's still the unanswered questions about like what did happen to his mom, who was the person that opened the door. So maybe that has something to do with what Roman, like that picture has to be significant of like that shadow creature or whatever in that picture in the office. Like, it has to be some significance to him. Once again, it's just a pilot, so you're not going to get all these answers all at once, but these are just some of the things kind of flowing through my mind. I'm curious like to see like how soon, or if at all, we get answers to a lot of this, you know, how much is going to be like, you know, very ambiguous. I mean, obviously with Susan's powers and everything, and like, it's like, okay, so she's got telekinesis and pyrokinesis. Like, to me, I think that's a little more like, okay, like that's in the realm of psychic abilities, and that kind of ties in with like you know, being able to connect with like the spiritual realm and everything. So it's not like too out there. It's not like, oh, she has flight. But I'm also curious, like, are they going to do other like psychic abilities? Like, is that stuff we're going to see? Like, I mean, is Susan even going to do it? Because she had told the daughter, being like, what was her name, Lauren, like, oh, you'll be able to get it under control. Because she said, like, right, like, women, like, the hormones and stuff like that. So it's like, oh, so it's like, I guess, I don't know if that's, like, based on, like, right, like, real-life studies into, like, psychic stuff like that women are more likely to get it because of their hormones and stuff like that. Or maybe it's just maybe in this continuity in this world, that's a thing. Like, I don't know where that was coming from. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I guess like maybe in this universe, like women are most likely to have psychic abilities than dudes. Maybe specifically those like telekinesis and pyrokinesis, maybe. It sets up a lot of really interesting things. I'm actually really, like I said, really excited to kind of spend more time with the series and see where it ultimately ends up taking us. Obviously, the tech they use to fight ghosts, finding out more about everyone, like how this team came together. Did Luke seek them out? Did they seek Luke out? Like how this whole agency got started. I'm sure like that's the whole point. Like just like Susan's got her past and Luke's got his past, I'm sure everyone does like feel like, what's up with that whole being an ex-priest thing? Like what happened there? August, you know, how'd you become the IT guy essentially? And once again, what Zoe's whole deal is, because like I said, we got one scene with Zoe and that was it. So also, I forgot to talk about it. There was that interesting little line between Luke and Megan, where it was basically, I forgot what the exact conversation was, but it was kind of like, even if you kind of don't believe in something, it could still hurt you. Like, he was like, liver cancer, and then he was like, the Easter Bunny. She's like, well, the Easter Bunny can hurt you. And he was like, yeah, now this isn't about my, I forgot what the wording was, but he basically was like, yeah, this isn't about my childhood. I'm like, now what the hell is that story? Is that supposed to be like a joke, throwaway line, leave it at that? Or is there something more to that? Like, it just, I completely forgot about that line. I love that for whatever reason, just casually throwing in the Easter Bunny. It's like, the Easter Bunny can hurt you. So, nevertheless, I'm really interested to see where this series ends up taking us, but you know, where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. Really quickly, I wanted to add this in here. If you are unaware, the second episode of SurrealEstate is already out. It doesn't officially air on, like, you know, the cable channel until next week, but it is out on both Hulu and Syfy's YouTube channel. So if you don't have Hulu, you can just watch it on Syfy's YouTube channel. They actually have both the first and second episode in full So if you want to check it out like that, I am going to watch it afterwards, after this, and record my review of it and everything. I haven't decided whether I'll just wait till next week to release it or whether I'll release it now. Since they are releasing it early, I probably will just go ahead and just put my review up maybe 30 minutes to like an hour after episode 1. So just kind of throwing it out there for anyone that's unaware. I'll probably bring it up again when with my review of episode 2, just in case anyone stumbles across it, and I'll let them know from the beginning that it's going to be like a spoiler review like all my reviews are. So just wanted to add that at the end here. So, but really that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.